Blood Omen received both critical and commercial success, and Kain was established as a fan-favorite PS1 character, an anti-hero who murdered his way across a dying world, only to have the entire future of Nosgoth hinge on his final decision. You didn't really think Kain would martyr himself. Either fate is very stupid in naming him the Chosen One, or the destiny of the Pillars and the future of Nosgoth is far more complex than we imagined. 1,000 years pass, and Kain's empire rises to become the dominant force in Nosgoth. The Dark Lord becomes a hellish legend, and sets his throne at the very base of the Pillars he condemned to decay and ruin. But all things must come to an end. Time and decay wear down even the strongest empires, and into this world, an unlikely champion will be born. A wraith created from the most agonizing of ends, hell-bent on tearing down the very foundation of Kain's empire and cleansing Nosgoth of the vampire scourge that now infests it. But what warrior or creature could dare challenge the might of vampiric royalty, those who drink the very lifeblood of their prey? What could possibly be more dangerous and possessed of an even deeper, more powerful hunger than they? Why don't we meet him? This is Soul Reaver. We once again return to the Pillars of Nosgoth. These majestic towers that once touched the stars now stand all but in ruin, and we see the king bastard and supreme tyrant himself, Kain, now enthroned at their base with his lieutenants gathered around him as we hear the voice of our new protagonist. You know what? He can introduce himself.
I am Raziel, firstborn of his lieutenants.
Kain has changed a lot in the 1,000 years since we last saw him, and his evolution is a point of pride for the now deified vampire lord. So when Raziel presents himself having surpassed his master's evolution, well, Kain is well known for his ego, and not so well known for his measured responses. Seemingly in a jealous rage, the Vampire King orders his firstborn lieutenant cast into the Lake of the Dead, where the acidic waters would burn him for all time. Raziel plunges through the swirling vortex, and all sense of space and time ceases, as his existence becomes white-hot agony. 500 years pass, and it is not a vampire prince, but a ruined, disfigured wraith that settles at the bottom of the lake. Raziel rises as he becomes aware of space and time once again, and a voice calls to him from the depths. The once proud firstborn of Kain's vampire dynasty is unsurprisingly distressed to see his body reduced to exposed muscle and sinew, but he has little time to consider his transformation as the voice of a creature that we shall call the Elder God calls to him. This creature claims to be the embodiment of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth in Nosgoth, a cycle that has been disrupted by the vampire scourge. Immortality is unnatural, and the souls of vampires, rather than being purified through death and reborn again, instead fester in their bodies and grow more and more rotten and perverse over time. As such, the Elder God has pulled Raziel from his torment to task him with ending Kain's tyranny, not because Raziel is some ordained chosen one, but because his hate for Kain is suitable enough motivation to get the job done. Raziel begins his journey in the depths of the underworld, and as the Wraith explores this distorted mirror of his once home, he discovers the wretched scavengers that hunt on the many wayward souls now lost here, and that his thirst for blood has been superseded by the very same hunger they possess, leading him to consume the souls of his defeated enemies. Once he has become suitably accustomed to his new form, he finally steps through a conduit connecting the land of the living and the dead, and returns to Nosgoth. Things have gotten bad. Nosgoth has completed its transformation from corrupted world to barren, apocalyptic wasteland. As Raziel explores this dead world, he finds horribly disfigured creatures sucking blood from a corpse, and is informed by his new benefactor that these are the children of his brother Dumar. It would seem that far from ascending into great nobility, the vampire clans have degenerated into feral beasts. And if that didn't give Raziel some clear concept of how long he's been gone, arriving at the sanctuary of the clans does. The once proud stronghold that houses the Pillars of Nosgoth and was the very seat of Kain's power while Raziel was a vampire, is now a broken and silent fortress. And now Raziel can truly grasp the centuries that passed since his execution. With the doors unmovable, even for a creature as powerful as he, Raziel heads towards another familiar landmark, the very abyss into which he was cast all that time ago. To the east of this place are the lands of his clan, and Raziel is eager to see what became of his bloodline in his absence. What he discovers, however, is utter desolation. His lands in ruin and his offspring eradicated, Raziel passes into the necropolis. This is the realm of his brother Malchiah. Weakest of all his brothers, Malchiah's vampire body barely sustains the flesh bound to it. His offspring have long since degenerated into wretched ghouls, devouring both the flesh and blood of their prey to sustain their wretched forms. In the heart of this lightless tomb, Raziel discovers that the centuries have not been kind to his brother. Years of grafting the flesh of his victims onto his body has transformed him into something truly horrifying. A creature of both the physical and spectral world, Malchiah is formidable indeed, impervious to strikes from Raziel's claws and able to hunt him in both planes of existence. His one mistake, however, was installing a colossal meat grinder in his throne room and then standing directly under it while Raziel turns the oversized handle that operates it. In truth though, it's quite obvious that Malchiah was more than ready for his immortality to end. By devouring his brother's monstrous soul, Raziel takes his power into himself and gains the ability to phase through certain barriers in the spectral realm. This allows him to enter the ruined sanctuary of the clans, and there, at the base of the Pillars of Nosgoth, he comes face to face with his murderer. Kain has not changed a speck since our last time with him in Blood Omen. He is as brash and powerful as he ever was, and he makes no apologies to his one-time progeny. When Raziel provokes him, however, Kain brings forth the blade that was used to alter the very destiny of Nosgoth itself, the weapon that slew the Nemesis long before he could ever rise into his power, the Soul Reaver. Kain and Raziel clash, and the battle climaxes in the only way it could. But as Kain strikes the killing blow, rather than destroying Raziel, the Soul Reaver shatters. Far from being shocked by this turn of events, however, Raziel comments that Kain seemed satisfied with the outcome. As the Wraith returns to the spectral realm to recover his strength, he finds the essence of the Soul Reaver now bound to his very arm, as though this sword that once drank the souls of Kain's very enemies has found its true twin in this soul-devouring wraith that we now control. How interesting. And one last surprise here at the Pillars. We once again encountered the spirit of Ariel. The once guardian of the Pillar of Balance remains here still, more than 1,500 years after her death at the hands of Mortanius. Now freshly armed and willing to fight, Raziel, like his master before him, begins to murder his way across the wretched wasteland of Nosgoth, slaying first his insectoid brother Zephon in the heart of the silenced cathedral, a demented sonic machine designed to repel vampires, and his water-dwelling brother Rahab in the depths of a drowned cathedral. But most importantly of all, Raziel discovers who he really is. Before he was a wraith, he was a vampire lord. But before that, he was a human. More so, he was a Sarafan war priest. These were once an order of holy knights who crusaded against the vampires of Nosgoth to protect humanity. Or so the legends say. We have in fact already glimpsed into the truth of such things, even meeting one in the shape of Malak, and heard tell of them from the very lips of Vorador.
Meddling with the affairs of man can do us no good. Seraphan witch hunts are much too tedious to concern ourselves with.
Crusading knights or murdering fanatics. Either way, Kain knew the irony of his choice to call back the souls of these dead warriors to serve him in the skins of the beasts they once fought to destroy. In the north of Nosgoth, Raziel finds the fortress of his brother Dumas in utter devastation, and full of the impaled corpses of his once proud kindred. Dumas, in his arrogance, had not suspected that he would be attacked from the human citadel, and was completely unprepared when they came. They slaughtered his bloodline and left him stapled to his own throne. Raziel is gracious enough to return Dumas to the world of the living, but only to bring about a more permanent ending to him. With all but one of his brethren slain, Raziel descends into the canyons of Nosgoth and discovers a place we have already visited. The domain of Mobius, to most a soothsaying oracle, but to those who knew him well, a powerful time streamer with a fanatical hatred of vampires. As Raziel descends deeper into Mobius's lair, he bears witness to himself, as though his whole existence, every event that came before, had been foretold and seen by Kain, and even some of what may come yet in the future. What does this all mean? Is all time and destiny written? Is free will a myth? In the final sanctuary, at the heart of it all, our hero will once again meet his nemesis, and here they will fight their decisive battle. In the last moment, however, Kain activates the time portal and flees through it, promising there to be more twists and turns before this dance ends. As Raziel approaches the portal, he hears a warning from the Elder God. To pass into time is to pass beyond his reach. But Raziel's thirst for vengeance must be satiated, and so he steps into the unknown to be greeted by
Raziel, Redeemer and Destroyer, Pawn and Messiah. Welcome, time-span soul. Welcome to your destiny.
I said before, we are far from finished with this guy. In Blood Omen, Nosgoth was starting to show signs of corruption and death everywhere, and by the time of Soul Reaver, that cycle has all but been completed. Kain is not only the last member of the Circle still corrupted by Nupraptor, but he became a tyrannical leader much like William the Nemesis. We will explore the rise of Kain's empire somewhat when we talk about the series Black Sheep Blood Omen 2. But we are very much at the end of the cycle, even before Raziel's execution at the start of the game. The pillars of Nosgoth stand in ruin, and I don't recall this terrifying swirling vortex being here 1,000 years or so ago. This particular form of Kain is what we refer to as Elder Kain, a creature much like Vorador that is now more monster than man. When Raziel is reborn into the world, even this mighty vampire empire has crumbled and decayed. The sanctuary of the clans is a long-abandoned relic. The humans of Nosgoth seem mostly confined to their one citadel, with only the bravest of their numbers venturing out to face the vampire scourge. In the introduction movie, Raziel describes the transformation that Kain and his brothers go through as a step towards divinity, a sentiment he will appreciate much more later on in his journey. Kain would transform first, then he and his brothers would undergo their own change sometime after. After Raziel's execution, however, something changed. The relationship between Kain and his lieutenants seems to have dissolved, and they in turn, far from stepping forward towards divinity, have devolved into more degenerate mutated forms. These reflect how they adapted to their specific weaknesses and environments. What's amazing here is how the environmental design tells us as much about the time between Blood Omen and Soul Reaver as it does the vampires that now inhabit this world. Let's consider Zephon for a moment. Zephon's lair is the Silenced Cathedral, and was conceived as a colossal weapon against vampires. Constructed by humans, it is a towering edifice of stone on a scale that speaks of incredible engineering and a powerful human empire able to organize and fund such a colossal undertaking. All throughout the cathedral, we see a complex system of pipes that once upon a time channeled the air at frequencies that were deadly to vampires. Raziel comments that this monument stood in defiance of Kain's empire, implying that the war for Nosgoth was bloody and hard fought, and the enemy very powerful. Had the cathedral been finished, it would have sounded a hymn that would have destroyed all vampires. This of course didn't happen, on account of Kain's forces overpowering those who made it, and Zephon and his brood moving in soon after. As Zephon's soul fell to corruption, his body mutated into a monstrous insectile thing. All around the cathedral we see gunk and cocooned bodies, making this place more a hive than anything else. Zephon himself is now quite repulsive and formidable, though I wonder why he couldn't have gotten one of his minions to take this small torch away. It would have saved him a lot of trouble. Much of the world and these creatures are born from the mind of concept artist Arnold Ayala. He worked very closely with director Amy Hennig and designer Seth Karas, and was responsible for bringing the vision of Nosgoth to life. Raziel, for example, is the work of many rounds of iteration and feedback from all members, and I won't lie, I could give a full character design lecture on this guy. Other areas of interest are the Drowned Abbey, another truly impressive structure that became flooded as the very landscape and weather patterns of Nosgoth shifted, as the corruption seeped deeper into the world, and Kain's armies marched on relentlessly. The Dominion of Humans is now one final citadel. Well, probably there are others scattered about, but we see this once proud race that spread across the world and constructed cities and colossal towers, now confined to thick stone walls, deep moats, and likely only spared from Kain's conquest by the need to have some humans around to feed himself and his kin. Much less a city and more a blood farm then. Another area that is rich in environmental storytelling is the underworld. I will talk more about this thing in a later video, as while he has a lot to say in this game, he and Raziel are at the very beginning of their relationship, and there are plenty of twists and turns to come here. Back in Blood Omen, I mentioned how the spirits of the dead seemed unable to move on. This was of course a game mechanic at heart. Killing something in its mortal form provided an opportunity to drink its blood and restore your vitality, and doing so to its ghost later refilled your mana. Now to be clear, almost nothing about Soul Reaver's story had even been conceived at the time that Silicon Knights came up with this mechanic, but looking back on the whole series in its current state, we can see how it kind of foreshadows what we see here. As Nosgoth dies and the vampires remain in their bodies, so too does the spectral realm also get twisted up. The underworld is now full of lost souls, unable to return to the wheel of fate, and destined to float forever in a warped version of the land they once walked. Worse still, these souls are preyed upon by the Sluar, the scavengers of the underworld. While scavengers are an important part of nature, it's implied that these things are a blight upon this realm, consuming souls to sustain themselves and denying the soul its chance to ever return to the wheel. The more formidable enemies in this world, though, are the vampire wraiths. More resistant in both life and death, vampire souls that refuse to return to the wheel and linger in the spectral realm develop into soul-devouring monsters themselves. As well as rocking an impressive visual aesthetic, they are far more formidable than the Sluar, and can suck Raziel's life force drive very quickly. This ability can be retained if circumstances conspire to return the wraith to its body. The most notable example of this is Dumar, who was bound and staked by vampire hunters, and whose soul has languished in the spectral realm for a long time indeed. All of these elements serve to paint Nosgoth now on the brink of collapse. It makes sense that now, more so than any other time, that the powers that be they the Elder God or some as yet unseen force, would choose a champion to try to deliver Nosgoth from utter catastrophe. Soul Reaver isn't finished. No doubt everyone here understands that nothing is guaranteed in the world of video games, especially not a sequel. Isn't that right, Alan? Adam. Wait a minute. Between changes in marketing trends and the rising cost of game development, the idea of a game ending on a cliffhanger like Soul Reaver did is a big risk indeed. To say nothing of how much an ending like that might be received by an audience, publishers are very quick to axe sequels to games that underperform. And in the case of monstrosities like EA, entire studios can be destroyed this way too. So, what happened here? Well, drama happened. This isn't exactly breaking news to any long-term fans, but newcomers may notice that Blood Omen developers Silicon Knights are conspicuously absent from the credits here. Unfortunately, the relationship between the one-time developer and their publisher Crystal Dynamics ended badly, and legal battles ensued, causing a significant delay to an already very ambitious project. And when I say ambitious, look at this. Shifting is a major game mechanic in Soul Reaver. We'll talk more about how it works into the gameplay loop later, but consider that in Blood Omen, there were load times just going from here to here. Now consider this fully 3D large-scale world that has two variations that can be shifted into without any load times, all running on the same console that Blood Omen was made for. The mind boggles, sir. The mind does in fact boggle very much. All of the details of the disagreement between Silicon Knights and Crystal Dynamics remain their own business, and the matter was ultimately settled out of court. The broad strokes, however, concern corporate politics and the ownership of the Kain IP, as well as an accusation made by Silicon Knights that Crystal Dynamics had in fact stolen their idea for a Kain 2. The truth, or lack thereof of this matter, wouldn't come to light however until around 2002, with the discovery of the Soul Reaver proto-game, Shifter. Shifter began as a unique IP, originally conceived by Amy Hennig, who worked on Blood Omen, and would go on to write and direct the Kain series from Soul Reaver to Defiance. Inspired by John Milton's Paradise Lost, it told the story of a fallen angel of death, cast down from the heavens and journeying across an apocalyptic wasteland to take revenge on his once creator. As well as possessing shape-shifting abilities, the titular Shifter character was a wraith that could move between two planes of existence, with environmental differences between these two planes helping to form the game's puzzle mechanics, as well as the character having a pair of tattered wings that it could glide on. Shifter exists as little more than a design document and concept art, as before serious production could begin, Crystal Dynamics, unsure if the project would have been able to stand up as its own IP, it would have, requested the concept be reworked into a sequel for Blood Omen. Amy Hennig has expressed that she was resistant and disappointed about this at the start, but like all great creative minds was able to ultimately transform this seeming problem into a great opportunity. We're getting ahead of ourselves here, but Hennig has been quoted as saying that her work on Legacy of Kain is her greatest achievement. The fact that Shifter was an original idea that was later adapted into a Legacy of Kain game basically removes any consideration that it was stolen from Silicon Knights, and very little has ever come to light about their proposed Kain 2 project. When the time came to bring the hammer down on Soul Reaver's development, hard decisions had to be made. This was long before the era of the disgusting practice of conning people into buying threadbare, unfinished games and then patching them to completion, or worse, saying you're going to patch them and then abandoning them later. The game needed to be solid, stable, and provide a great experience, and that meant paring back on the locations and story. As such, at least one of Raziel's brothers is noticeable by his absence. Tyrell's kin appear at various points in the game, and form some of the most challenging enemies you'll come across, sporting powerful physical and ranged attacks, and requiring precise dodging and countering skills to bring down. Yet he himself will not be seen until much later in the series. In the interest of meeting deadlines and the often precarious House of Cards nature of a complex series of systems that makes up a video game, most of the cut content, areas, voice lines, code, etc., was kept in the game but simply blocked off so that it couldn't be accessed. This has led to dedicated fans, such as the good people at the Legacy of Kain, the Lost World site, uncovering and even working to recreate as much of the original Soul Reaver cut as possible. I'll leave a link to some of their work in the description, and if you know of any more, please let me know. Soul Reaver had its own unique engine developed for it, derived from the proprietary engine used to make Gex 3. Remember Gex? Nah, me neither. There's a heap of technical jargon about it on the wiki page, which to a development nerd such as myself is really interesting, but I won't bore most of you with it here. Just know it's really smart and eliminates load times. Maybe Rockstar could look into this stuff for the next time they try to make a Max Payne game. The shifting feature is easily the engine's crowning achievement though. It uses a function very similar to what we call shape keys in modern 3D design. These are very often used to deform faces for animation and lip syncing. Simply put, each vertex has two, or these days many positions stored for it, which enables the computer to morph fluidly between the two. This, along with the scale of the environmental design, no doubt inspired by the likes of the original Tomb Raider games, and the fluid and responsive animations for movement and combat, are what really makes this game stand out both technically as well as narratively. In many ways, Soul Reaver's gameplay is as far removed from Blood Omen as the visual style and the technology used to power it, and yet it actually retains a lot of similarities. At its core, Raziel, much like Kain, starts with a basic set of abilities, and in the process of exploring Nosgoth, comes into possession of new ones that in turn open up new areas of the map and make him a more formidable opponent in combat. Some of these are essential to finishing the game, and some are just there to make Raziel a real force to be reckoned with. The transition from 2D to 3D brought with it large changes to both exploration and combat. Indeed, the combat in Blood Omen was the crux of the primary gameplay loop, while in Soul Reaver, it seems to be much more about exploration and puzzle solving. The new fully 3D environments now provide Nosgoth with a sense of scale that just wasn't there in Blood Omen, bringing that oh so important word into the level design: verticality. While Blood Omen clearly drew a lot of inspiration from games like A Link to the Past, this one definitely drew from the Tomb Raider series. I mean, yes, we see inspiration from Ocarina of Time also, which had its own massive environments full of blocks that needed pushing, but I'd say I see a lot more Tomb Raider in Soul Reaver than Ocarina. Raziel is definitely a lot stronger, more resilient, and mobile than an upper-class girl from London. Indeed, as the Elder God comments,
"Your physical prowess surpasses what you knew in life."
And he also doesn't die or take damage from falling. So while I do have a soft spot for those old Tomb Raider games, and they may wind up being talked about on this channel one day, I appreciated the speed and fluidity of Raziel's movements over Lara's. Because Nosgoth is a larger connected world, and some backtracking is required to finish the game, there are handy portals located all around the map. These doors operate similar to the bat beacons from Blood Omen. Effectively, once one has been found and activated, it is linked into every other door that Raziel has already found, making it a convenient fast travel option to almost every location on the map. Raziel's essential powers are Phase Shift, Glide, Wraith Blade, Climbing, Force Blast, this one can be a little OP at times, Swimming, and Constricting. Some of these are innate to Raziel's new Wraith body, and others are earned from devouring the souls of one of his brothers, and reflects how each brother adapted to their vampiric weaknesses and environments over time. Rahab, for example, is devastated by sunlight, something that only usually affects fledgling vampires. As such, he developed a resistance to the acidic touch of water so that he could swim down into the darkest oceanic depths and hide from the sun's rays there. While Raziel is no longer a vampire, his mortal vessel is flimsy and easily decomposed by water, meaning immersion will send him back to the spectral realm. Rahab's soul is the answer to this problem though, and his dungeon, the Drowned Abbey, is one of the most frustrating to navigate, but it's mercifully short compared to some others. Each ability enhances Raziel's movement in some way, removing barriers and opening up more of Nosgoth to be explored. Raziel's wings, though ruined, are far from decorative as well. He is able to glide between ledges by spreading them like a parachute. This affords the player more airtime to adjust their trajectory when making big jumps, and makes this element of traversal a lot less frustrating, though it doesn't prevent you from having to fight the most formidable enemy in the game, the camera. Soul Reaver's third-person camera was, and still is, its most frustrating aspect. Bound by default to the shoulder buttons for rotation around Raziel, it can be a huge problem in combat, and especially in platforming. It doesn't automatically snap behind Raziel and often swings wildly when moving, which can affect your direction and be devastating when traversing a narrow causeway. It can also simply get stuck behind scenery, leaving your view completely obscured while enemies move in all around you. It's not impossible to work with, even now, but it does take some getting used to, especially when you've had the convenience of modern control schemes for a very long time. Getting back to the good stuff though, Raziel's standout ability, without a doubt, is his power to shift between the physical and spectral realms. As an undead wraith, the spectral world is his home, and he can slip back into it either when his physical body has taken too much damage, or at will by using a spell. Travelling to the physical realm, however, has a couple of restrictions. Raziel must be at full health, and he must use one of the many conduits located all around the map. Now, I've already talked about what a technically impressive feat this is, but what's the point of it all? Well, traversal really. The layout of the physical and spectral realms are not one-to-one. In fact, they are considerably different in some areas. What this means is that routes that are closed off to Raziel in one world are very often open in another, with each realm having certain pros and cons for its environmental puzzle solving. In the spectral realm, for example, Raziel can't move blocks, throw switches, or really do anything that affects the layout of the world. And to be clear, this game has a lot of blocks to move. Probably 60 to 70% of the puzzles in this game involve dragging, flipping, and stacking boxes of some kind or another. On the other hand, once he has acquired the soul of his brother Melchiah, Raziel is able to phase through certain barriers while he's in the spectral realm. This system of shifting between worlds and having different advantages and disadvantages to each is the most unique aspect of the game, and is put to good use all throughout, but especially in Dumar's Lair, where it's really important. Combat in Soul Reaver is quite deep. Well, not this part. Raziel has a fluid combo and dodge system that he can use to fight his former vampire brethren, and he's also able to wield a variety of weapons. As we know from our adventures with Kain and Blood Omen, vampires are incredibly resistant to most kinds of damage, and can regenerate wounds quickly, so the objective is for Raziel to stun his targets with regular attacks, so that he can take advantage of one of their vampiric weaknesses to slay them and devour their souls. This includes impaling, you'll be doing a lot of this, fire, immersion in water, sunlight, and the coolest of them all, the Soul Reaver Wraithblade. Actually, let's watch a few of these. The only way to be 100% sure that the buggers don't keep coming back though, is by devouring their souls, at which point their bodies will disintegrate. Removing polearms from an impaled vampire before you've drank their life essence will return it to battle anew. And if you pull one from a vampire that's been taken into the spectral realm for too long, you might be in for something shocking. What this means is, as much as possible, you don't want to be caught without a weapon, or you're not going to be able to finish off your opponents. This is actually a big problem in the second large dungeon, infested by Zephon. At this stage, Raziel will be armed with the wraith form of the Soul Reaver, and when he's at full health, the blade is able to manifest in the material realm, and grant his attacks more damage, longer reach, and the devastating finisher. Okay, one more time. But a single hit will take that away, and Zephon's brood, if nothing else, have plenty of reach to take it away. This can be quite frustrating in some areas, but I guess it teaches you not to worry about trying to slay everything. Much like in Blood Omen, vanquished enemies have a knack of returning once you've put a suitable distance between Raziel and their spawn points. This particular problem does become less of an issue later on in game, as you'll be better at the combat overall, have access to the force projectile power, and if you've been exploring, you'll have access to the glyph powers too. The glyphs are non-essential power-ups that can be located throughout Nosgoth. Since they usually require Raziel to return to a previous area with new abilities to access them, they can only be accessed by exploring what might be considered secret areas of the game world. I used to love tracking this sort of thing down in old games. I don't know what it was, but there was always something about secret areas in old games that felt like you were being rewarded for finding it. Even in the old Doom games, secret levels took the form of things like a Wolfenstein homage. It's very much the same here. That sense of sneaking behind the scenes, as though you're playing a 2D game and have managed to find some way behind the background and off the edge of the screen. The most notable Easter egg here is Nupraptor's lair, which just looks awesome, and is guaranteed to have any Blood Omen player breaking out with goosebumps when they see it. The human citadel is also amazing. No doubt this place had a much bigger role to play in the originally conceived game, but in the release game it's just a place to hunt for health pickups and find the water glyph, though it does answer the question of where all the humans are hiding in this post-apocalyptic vampire world. After all, vampires can't thrive very well if they don't have any food. Most glyphs have cool animations once their respective puzzles have been solved, as giant statues come to life and an ancient lighthouse is rekindled. The powers themselves are linked to different elements, but really only take the form of stunning or burning an enemy. I remember back during my first playthrough only collecting the stone glyph, and when I did my completionist run after, I was low-key hoping for some kind of secret ending to be unlocked. To say that Soul Reaver has withstood the test of time would be something of an understatement. Sure, its late PlayStation 1 era visuals are a little frayed around the edges now, and many of its systems have been improved upon by other games that came after it. But this is far from some crusty relic better left in the past. This story and its characters are still thrilling to explore and meet. The impressive voice talents of Templeman and Bell, and all the supporting cast, including the late great Tony J, combined with wonderfully designed characters, terrifying monsters, and scenery that paints a vivid picture of what came before all this, all work together to sweep you away into a dark fantasy epic. It's so easy to be invested in Raziel's story, and intrigued in what this place is, and learn the story of how it all came to be. On top of that, this game has great traversal mechanics and really solid combat that serves to create a great sense of progression as you unravel the puzzle of each location, fight your way through the undead legions, and leave their blooded corpses impaled on spikes or as nothing more than charred remains left out in the sunlight or in the depths of water. I really enjoyed replaying this, both as a piece of nostalgia, but also just as a great game. Yes, the combat could do with a little more depth to it, and the camera really needs a patch of some kind, and these days, well, it's pretty hard to get the game running, which is a real shame. The entire series hasn't received any kind of TLC for a long time. Even in this age of constant remasters and remakes, and long dead series being birthed again from their ashes, for better or worse, nothing has been said about Legacy of Kain or Soul Reaver. The Steam and GOG versions of this game are, at the time of writing, not available. This led to me using a Dreamcast ROM of the game to replay and capture the footage for this video, and that seems to be the best way to go about it at this moment. Despite those issues though, it's one hell of an experience, and I can't recommend it enough to anyone watching. The gateway to time opens, and Kain enters the portal, leaving Raziel with only one choice as to where to go next. Fueled by his intense hate of Kain, but also by the mystery of seeing his entire life laid out in the prophetic visions he's seen in this place, Raziel approaches the gate. Heedless of the Elder God's final warnings, the vengeful wraith steps into the portal and is at once transported through the oceans of time. He emerges in a dark place and is greeted by the time streamer Mobius. True, this man may once have been Kain's enemy too, but that was a different time, and his motives were anything but pure. This wily old trickster is just as likely an enemy as an ally. So then what? Well, unlike my younger self, we'll be diving into this mystery very soon. For while there was almost 2 years to wait until the next installment in the series appeared on the PS2, it's all here now, laid out for us to examine. And so for now, I shall leave you in the care of the Time Streamer and one final prophecy that spells of something terrible to come in the very near future.
Where time is but a loop, a loose stitch in the universal cloth, a streamer might seize upon a chance, a fatal slip, and plunge the fate of planets into chaos.